Be seated. Yes.
Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Mr. Nurmi, you may give your closing argument.
Fear, love, sex, lies, and dirty little secrets. These aspects of the human condition may not be universal, but they were, and each one of these aspects of the human condition played a prominent role in the relationship that Jodi Arias shared with Travis Alexander. The relationship that began in the fall of 2006 when Mr. Alexander met Jodi Arias at a prepaid legal convention in Las Vegas. And the relationship that ended tragically on June 4th, 2008. And because these aspects of the human condition played such a prominent role in this relationship, it makes sense that the evidence that you've heard starting on January 2nd is a tale of fear, love, sex, lies, and dirty little secrets. Now, ladies and gentlemen, one of the other things we told you at the beginning of this trial was that ultimately your job would be to determine one thing. Your job will be to determine what happened. You read some jury instructions yesterday that you were the finder of fact. What happened? What happened in the minutes in time between what we see here and Exhibit 159, June 4th, 2008, 5:29 and 20 seconds. What happened between what we see in this photograph and what we see in Exhibit 162? Mr. Alexander's body being drugged across the bathroom floor at 5:32 and 16 seconds. What happened in those 3 minutes is ultimately what you were to decide. Is this 3 minutes in time, is this a culmination of a plot, a plan that Jodi Arias hatched in May of 2008, in which she was going to go from her grandparents' home in Wairika, California, to Travis Alexander's home so she could kill him? Was it what the state said it was yesterday? Was it this plan? Or was it an act of self-defense forced upon Miss Arias by the actions of Mr. Alexander? Or was it something else? That is ultimately what your job is to determine. Fear, love, sex, lies, and dirty little secrets will help you understand, I think, what happened in those 3 minutes. And as you begin, and we've seen certainly aspects of fear throughout the course of this trial, right? And we'll talk about that more later, but it occurred to me as I began thinking about talking to you this morning that you may have some fear. You've been listening to evidence for 12 weeks now, more than 12 weeks, since January 2nd. And you may feel, maybe I forgot something. Maybe I didn't understand a crucial piece of evidence. Maybe when I get back to deliberate, my fellow jurors will not feel the same way that I do about this case. They won't see things the same way. Maybe you fear how your verdict will be received.
Objection for proper argument.
Approach.
You may fear how your verdict will be received by those who love Travis Alexander, by those who love Jodi Arias, or by the world at large. But ladies and gentlemen, as the jury instructions that were read to you yesterday indicate, your job in determining what happened between these 3 minutes in time is to do an objective analysis of the facts and evidence presented to you. You are not to be guided by sympathy or prejudice or fear, but instead by your personal belief. And rest assured, each and every one of you are here because all the parties involved believe that you are the type of people that would have the courage of your convictions to stand by your personal belief against whatever pressures you may feel. Each one of you is entitled to deliver your verdict to this courtroom. You do not have to succumb to the pressure of a fellow juror who may not agree with you. You can have the courage of your conviction to deliver your own verdict. You are to have the courage of conviction to deliver your own verdict based on the evidence you've heard. Nothing more. Nothing more. You are asked to put that fear aside and look at the evidence. At the evidence. And before we talk about the evidence and what this case is about, I think it's important to talk about what this case is not about. It's not about Snow White. It's not even about any of the 7 dwarfs. It's not about bad haircuts, and it's not about the sexual orientation of any of the witnesses.
Objection, arguing facts not on evidence.
It's not even about whether or not you like Jodi Arias. 9 days out of 10, I don't like Jodi Arias.
Objection,
But that-
arguing his belief.
Sustained.
That's the fact is stricken.
Yes.
It is directed to disregard the last statement.
But that doesn't matter. Your liking her or not liking her does not objectively assess the evidence. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen? It's not even about her sitting before the cameras of Inside Edition and saying that no jury will convict her. It's not about that. It's about the evidence. What happened? What happened between what we see in Exhibit 159 and what we see in Exhibit 162? Well, I guess you know there's one more thing this case isn't about. Remember we heard that charge of felony murder yesterday and the state making an argument that was incomprehensible? This idea that, well, if you believe Jodi's version of events, she's guilty of felony murder because she went to Travis's home and she decided to steal his gun. And in the course of trying to steal his gun, she shot him. She went there, they had sex, they did all these things. Then she decided she wanted his gun and decided to take it. And wanted it so bad that she was willing to kill him. That's the theory of felony murder they have put forward. That shows a little fear, and we'll talk about some of the fear that the state has demonstrated throughout this case. But that's just some of it, right? We also heard this idea that, well, she was unwelcome once she put the weapon upon him and she was there to commit a burglary or another felony. There's no other felony, ladies and gentlemen. There's nothing. It's silly. It's fearful. That charge is there out of fear. It makes no sense. Under any scenario does that make any sense. Either she was there to kill him because the state said, hey, this is a plot that began in May. Either she was there to kill him or it wasn't, or she wasn't. And that's ultimately what we're here to determine. Now, what is this case about? Well, as we just spoke of and just mentioned, yesterday, the state says to you that in May of 2008, Jodi Arias came up with a plan. Now, they pointed to a couple different days yesterday. Pointed to May 19th, the day that Miss Arias had a conversation with Miss Housley that she was fearful, or excuse me, that Mr. Alexander was fearful of Jodi. Of course, on May 10th, we heard that they had a phone sex conversation. And on May 26th, we heard this conversation, we heard bits of this, or questions about this conversation, in which Mr. Alexander had called Miss Arias a whore, a slut, and a three-hole wonder. And the state theorizes at some point in time here in late May, I guess, Jodi Arias decides that Travis Alexander, what we heard yesterday was that he had finally decided to end the relationship and she couldn't deal with it. Well, let's start there. Because what you're going to see as it relates to this so-called plan is it doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense at all. And the first place it doesn't make any sense is the very premise of why. Now, the state doesn't have to prove motive, but they've come up with this motive so we can discuss it. Why? Because she couldn't live without Travis Alexander. Right? She's crazy. She can't break up with any of her boyfriends. She can't let it go. She couldn't live without Travis Alexander. All right, that's the theory. That's the motivation. That's why she starts this plan into action. Except for the fact that, remember, in May of 2008, she had moved back to Wairika, California to get away from Travis Alexander. To get away. She didn't want to be around him anymore. She talked in her journals about how the cloud had lifted, right? These journals that were later argued to be incomplete, and we'll talk about that more later. There's no rules of journaling, but the state has submitted that to you, so we'll discuss it. But point of fact is, she moved away. This girl is supposedly obsessed, moves away. They still talk on the phone, but she moved away. What else is she doing? We heard evidence that she had an account on LDS Linka, a Mormon dating site. She was a young Mormon woman in her mid-20s, much like probably a lot of the people on that website, who was looking for someone who shared their philosophical beliefs. Now, the state has tried to cast aspersions on that, but ultimately, a lot of people use these sites, and Jodi was using them. She wasn't so locked in on Travis that she wasn't looking for other men. And then we met one of those other guys, right? Ryan Burns. He sat there right before you. She began conversating with him. Phone, text messages, and they had planned to meet. She was interested in moving on, moving past Travis Alexander. So this whole idea to begin with of why this plan was put into place. This plan would have been masterminded, right, in May of 2008. Because for this very reason. And the reason doesn't make any sense. Okay. What next doesn't make sense? Well, the state tells you that in order to effectuate this plan she's conjured up to kill Travis Alexander, but once this plan is conjured up, what does she need? She needs a way to shoot him, right? Way to kill him. So the state says she orchestrated a theft of a gun. Now, in Exhibit 325, we see this so-called gun cabinet, this impenetrable force. We also see this in 326, the same gun cabinet. Now, I would say to you, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, that if she wanted a weapon and this is the weapon she wanted, for whatever reason, keep in mind this is a .25 caliber gun, a very weak gun. But if she wanted this weapon, and she was going to leave and go to Mesa on a covert mission with a single-minded purpose to kill Travis Alexander, and that's what we're talking about here. She could have just reached her hand in there the day she was leaving and taken that gun. We never know whether it would be discovered missing or not. There would be no police report. There would be no evidence. Nothing. The other thing is, what we heard, is that Jodi, when she was in Wairika, she didn't live with her parents, but they were there. And one of the bits of evidence you heard was that Jodi's father owned guns that were not registered. She could have got one from Dad. Probably a more powerful gun. But she didn't, right? Well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you, first of all, why would you stage this burglary? Right? This burglary that the state wants you to believe is so suspicious. Why would she stage this when she could just reach in and get it or get a gun from another source? You know where else she could have got a gun? We heard about Matt McCartney, the friend that wouldn't betray her as the state tried to portray so much on the cross-examination of Jodi Arias. He had guns too. She stopped in Monterey, but no. He didn't get a gun there either. Would have been untraced. Would have been no sign of it. But under this concocted theory that she orchestrated this theft, she breaks in herself, steals money, a DVD player, and this .22 caliber gun. And it creates a police report and it creates a trail. Would that be a choice? And keep in mind, the state conceded yesterday that Jodi Arias is a smart woman. Is that behavior consistent with a smart woman who is starting, planning this covert mission? Keep in mind, it's covert, very important. That's what the state said yesterday. Covert mission to go to Mesa, Arizona and kill Travis Alexander. Why would you start a trail? The type of gun, the bullets, everything. It doesn't make any sense. Why would she do that? So now, we have two nonsensical propositions. Why she would want to kill Travis Alexander and how she obtained the weapon. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the nonsense kind of continues from there. Because, of course, what else would she need to go on this covert mission to Mesa, Arizona? Well, she needs a way to get to Mesa, Arizona, right? Well, we heard one thing. She owned a car. Could have drove it to Mesa, Arizona. Now, we heard that maybe it wasn't in the best mechanical shape. And, as the state could theorize, maybe it would have been recognized. All right? Okay. So she's in Wairika, California. She needs a car. Of course, who's up in Wairika, California again? Her mother, her father, her sister, and her grandparents. All with cars. She could have exchanged cars. She could have come up with some reason. I'm going on a road trip. Can I take your car? None of it. None of those actions would have caused there to be any sort of paper trail, right? You borrow your mom's car, you go on a long trip, no paper trail. You borrow your dad's car, you go on a long trip, no paper trail. Those people, those same people, mother, father, they also could have rented a car for Jodi Arias, right? Nothing linking it to her, but does she do that? Does this smart woman who's planning this covert mission, does she do that? No, she doesn't. And the state theorizes that she didn't rent a car in Wairika, California, and did it instead in Redding, California, because she didn't want to be recognized in Wairika. But she hadn't lived there for years, number one. And number two, Redding, she was with her brother, and at that time, his fiance. So there were witnesses to her being in Redding, California. And the other issue is this choice she made to rent a car at Redding, as if it would somehow be covert that way. No one will recognize me. That's the theory, right? No one will recognize me. No one will know. But what does she have to do? You don't go to budget rent a car, plop down a couple $100s, and drive off with their car. Car rentals don't work that way. You gave a driver's license and a credit card information. There's a pretty clear paper trail as to what took place when she went to the Redding airport. And keep in mind, too, I think that's important. She went to an airport. An airport with security cameras and security all around. An airport, not some rental car agency on the outskirts of town, right? An airport. Doesn't make any sense if you're on a covert mission. Now, let's take a look at this paper trail. What does Miss Arias do to get this car, right? Exhibit 235, there's various receipts. She puts her initials. She signs her name. Paper trail. Not very covert so far. Not at all. Now, adding to this level of nonsense again, and this kind of gets into lying as well, this idea that, well, Jodi didn't really reserve the car online at Priceline, as she said. She lied to you. She really did it at budget. But let's take a look at these receipts here, or the bank statement. She got the car. When did she get the car? She got the car in June, right? As she was getting ready to go on this trip. She gets the car in early June, right? June 2nd. She gets the car. She returns the car on June 9th. June 9th, 2008. You were shown yesterday what is Exhibit 523. And we see the charge there for the car rental. Budget rent-a-car, right? Oops. Yep, budget rent-a-car. Now the state says, well, look at here, you see, there was a price line charge for airfare and that happened right away, and therefore she's lying. But let's face the facts here. That $233.97 that you see up there, that was charged when she returned the car. Airfare and car rentals are different. Under these times, we know that when we purchase airfare, you have your common experience. If you've rented a car or purchased airfare, you realize that, well, you do that. When you buy a plane ticket, you have to give all your identifying information and you pay for it. When you rent a car, oftentimes you reserve a car and pay for it when you're done. You put a deposit down on the credit card, you pay for it when it's done. That's when she paid for it. Now the state has tried to argue that that's a lie. That Miss Arias is lying. She didn't use Priceline. Those people at Priceline aren't getting their money, right? And this is certainly one thing the state has done as it relates to lies. Jodi Arias has made some lies about what happened. So then, why not just pile on? Set up a house of cards and a scenario where they say Jodi's lying and knock it down. But here's the thing, she wasn't lying. There's no evidence that she was lying. We don't know what kind of arrangement Budget and Priceline has. Mr. Colombo, he didn't tell you what kind of arrangement they have. He didn't know. So she rents this car. And Mr. Colombo says when she rented the car, her hair was blonde. And we had some discussions of hair color. But it wasn't, right? We saw the pictures. Mr. Colombo saw her driver's license. Jodi Arias had blonde hair when she had her driver's license picture. But you saw pictures, right? We saw a picture 413, Exhibit 413, taken on May 10th, 2008. And no one tried to have an expert testify and say this is a certain color hair. You can use you can look at it. You can look at your own judgment. We may have different shades of brown. We have Exhibit 414. And Exhibit 414 was taken on May 15th. Jodi and her parents' dog, May 15th. You judge for yourself. May 17th, Exhibit 415. Judge for yourself. Is that some sort of bright blonde hair? Okay. What else is at the car rental agency? We have this issue. Jodi wanted a white car instead of a red car because the red car would draw the cops' attention. Well, some of us have heard that myth as it relates to speeding tickets. Maybe it's a myth, maybe it's not. But with everything else, so far we have nothing that makes sense about a covert mission, right? Nothing. The difference between a white car and a red car isn't going to be the difference between being found and not found, being discovered and not discovered. And there's many things we can talk about in that regard. But that doesn't make any sense either, that's a big deal. Okay. Now you would think, ladies and gentlemen, wouldn't you, that if somebody was on a covert mission, right, and now we're at June 2nd, she's in Reading, she's got the car. And under the state's theory, she has the car, she's got the gun. She's ready to rock, right? So does she then go from Redding, California to Mesa, Arizona, nonstop in order to go on this covert mission to kill Travis Alexander? You don't stop anywhere, you don't visit any people, there's no witnesses. You go in there clean and you do your business, right? Did she do that? Oh, no, she didn't. Doesn't make any sense. What does she do? She stops in Monterey, California. What does she do in Monterey, California? She visits 2 former boyfriends. This crazy woman who can't let it go has friendships with 2 of her former boyfriends, Matt McCartney and Daryl Brewer. And she had a relationship with Daryl's son because they were together so long. So she had breakfast with Daryl and his son and spent some time at a karaoke bar with Matt McCartney. So what she had done, if she's on this covert mission, is it's not quite so covert anymore now, is it? We've alerted the world to this gun theft. We've alerted the world to the rental car. And we've alerted the world to where we're going or the presence. And then Daryl Brewer says, well, she told me she was going to Mesa and needed gas cans. Well, if this was a covert mission, first of all, and I would submit to you he was probably mistaken about Mesa. She did go there. But whether or not she was planning on going there or not. But think about it. If this was a covert mission, would you say to your ex-boyfriend, can I borrow a couple gas cans and I'm going to Mesa? Doesn't make any sense. So the nonsensical nature of the state's theory continues all the way to Monterey, California. She does borrow gas cans from Daryl. But then again, that doesn't make any sense either, right? You're on this covert mission. You can buy gas cans and no one will be the wiser, right? But you borrow gas cans because you say you're going to Utah. I don't know the way. Gas may be more expensive, what have you. She's not familiar with the route. So she borrows gas cans. As they often did, you heard Daryl Brewer say, as they often did on their road trips. It wouldn't make any sense as far as this covert mission goes, right? Well, what else happened in Monterey? Did she just do that and nothing else? No, something else happened. You saw weeks ago some receipts. Receipts for various things. Gas. Gas cans. But what happened in Monterey in terms of those receipts? Now again, we're on this covert mission, right? We don't want to be detected. Don't want to be detected. What does she do? She goes to the bank. Remember now, she has 2 different accounts with Washington Mutual. She has a business account and she has a checking account. So what does she do? She deposits some money into one account. She deposits money into another account. Notice one account ends in 8006, one ends in 7148. She deposits $400 in one, $300 in the other. And we also have a deposit in 237007 of $100 into 7148. So as we look at exhibits 237005, 237006, and 237007, what do we have? Let me make sure you can see them all. What do we have? We have a transfer of money between accounts, right? And, well, Jodi Arias wasn't a rich woman in June of 2008. She had a balance in one account of $548, and she had a balance in another one of $207. So she's got what, 750 bucks, right? She's moved around. She said some of it was for business purposes, some of the trip was for personal purposes. That's why she moved some of this money around. Okay. Well, again, if you're on this covert mission, why do you do these banking transactions, right? Why do you do these banking transactions and leave a trail of where you're at? And keep in mind, they're all in Monterey, right? Monterey, Monterey, Monterey. All in Monterey. She didn't do this back in Wairika. She didn't do this back on May 28th, did she? Remember, keep in mind, on May 28th, right here, this plan was in action. A gun was in her hands and she was working on the rest of it. She didn't pull out any cash, right? We saw, and we'll talk later as we go further on this journey, this trail. She didn't pull out a bunch of cash in late May or any time before she came. Because remember, she had enough, 750 bucks. She wanted to do this covert mission. She simply could have gone there without the need for gas cans. You know, when you buy gas with cash, you don't have to give your personal identifying information. We heard that makes sense, your own common sense and experience. And we also heard that from the lady who works for Tesoro. You pay with cash. There's no need for a receipt. They don't take identifying information. So she had this $750 or so, and she doesn't take it out. She could have put it in cash. She didn't do that. She wanted to buy gas cans covertly. What could she have done, right? She could have gone into Walmart or Target or wherever, bought gas cans, and walked right out, right? No one even the wiser. She wouldn't have a witness. She wouldn't have a witness who she borrowed gas cans from. But again, if you're on a covert mission, that doesn't make any sense to create this witness to save 20 bucks or so. $12.96. The state said yesterday $12.96 is the price of premeditation. Well, $26 seems like a small price to pay to cover your tracks if this is what you're doing. Now, what does she do here, though? She does buy some gas cans, right? The next stop in this trip is we know that she stopped in Salinas, California. And looking at Exhibit 237008. What does she do? She buys a gas can with cash. Now keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, the state says that this was done by this smart woman under the premise that she did the calculation that she needed another gas can to get into Mesa, Arizona without being detected. Of course, we know she had the money to buy gas without being detected, without there being a paper trail. She had that money in the bank, so that doesn't make any sense. But here's the other thing that doesn't make any sense. She buys this extra gas can, right? And here she is with this receipt. Well, I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, but I've never been to a Walmart that doesn't have a garbage can. Why wouldn't this smart woman, why wouldn't she just take this receipt and drop it right in the garbage? I don't want anyone to know I bought this gas can because I'm on a covert mission. Drop it in the garbage. She didn't do that, did she? It doesn't make any sense. Then there's this theory, this receipt has been bandied about. This is evidence that Jodi Arias lied to you, right? That's what the state said. She lied to you on the stand in the light of truth. And we'll talk about shining the light of truth on some people that have been involved in this trial later. But she doesn't throw it away. And she says she returned the item. Did she ever say she returned it to the exact Walmart? You can go back to your memory. She was in Pasadena. She was in different places. There's plenty of places where this happened. But the state says, oh, look, we checked all the registers at this Salinas, at this Walmart. Did they check the others? Do they know? Who knows? But again, set up a house of cards and knock it down and call her a liar. Because that's the basis we're going to use for our case. And look, ladies and gentlemen, if Jodi Arias were accused of the crime of lying, I could not stand before you in good conscience and say she's not guilty of that crime. But nowhere in your jury instructions are you asked to convict Jodi Arias of lying. There is no verdict form that you will have to say, is Jodi Arias guilty of the crime of lying or not? Well, of course she is, but there's no verdict form to that regard because that's not the crime she's being charged with. It's premeditated murder. That's the ultimate crime. Okay. Now the other thing that happens in Salinas is the state made this comments about the license plate, right? This gang of skateboarders that need a screwdriver to be in the gang, right? That was the comment. That was the facetious nature of this theory. Jodi Arias told you, and there was all this discussion, all this cross-examination. How was the license plate leading? How was it, the front plate, everything else? What Jodi told you is that she saw the plate reflecting, she picked it up and she put it in her car because she thought it was her front license plate. There was no talk of the back license plate. No talk of it. Now, what the state brought forward to you yesterday seemed to be this theory that at some point in time, what Miss Arias did to avoid detection was remove the license plate. Remove it. So she wouldn't be detected. Well, that doesn't make any sense. What would draw the eye of a law enforcement officer more than a car with a plate missing? Probably the next best thing that would draw the attention of a law enforcement officer would be a license plate that was upside down. Right? We heard about that. Officer Galletti from the West Jordan Police Department said, I noticed it because it was upside down and for no other reason. Doesn't make any sense that Jodi would have put this plate upside down if she's on this covert mission. Remember, she's still trying to be undetected. She's trying to go to Utah to set up her alibi. So, that doesn't make any sense either. But let's back up the car, literally and figuratively, right? Because the next point of conduct that is important here is Pasadena. Miss Arias goes to Pasadena. And one of the things we see is that she bought gas. And of course, it'll be the last receipt I pull up, but we can see she bought gas in Pasadena. Here we go. Pasadena, California, she buys gas. Now that receipt is definitely faded over time. Let's see here. Exhibit 237.011 and 237.013 and 237.012. She buys gas. Okay. When did this gas purchase occur? June 3rd, 2008. So on June 3rd of 2008, Miss Arias is in the midst of a covert mission to Mesa, Arizona, designed with the single-minded purpose of killing Travis Alexander. June 3rd. She had all that money in the bank. She doesn't take it out. And she goes to an Arco in Pasadena, June 3rd, about 8:42 in the evening, and she buys gas. She makes 3 separate purchases for gas. One of them right here on the right, boy, that's a debit card. That can be traced. Gee whiz, that doesn't make any sense if you're on a covert mission, does it? And of course, she kept the receipts. Well, that doesn't make any sense if you're on a covert mission to keep these receipts. When she filled up her gas cans, and keep in mind, when we talk about all this, you know, the state says, oh, it's positive. She had to have 3 gas cans because of the amount. But they haven't provided you a lick of evidence as it relates to how much gas that Ford Focus holds. Not a lick. Those calculations are based on nothing. But okay. She creates this paper trail. She buys all this gas. What else happened on June 3rd, 2008, that evening? Remember, something real important happened that evening. All right? She spoke with Ryan Burns, the man who she was going to go see in the Salt Lake City area. Now keep in mind, in terms of lies, part of what the state has said is, you didn't know you were in Salt Lake? Well, you know, she was in some suburbs, that sort of thing. Call her a liar. She didn't know she was in Salt Lake. She was in West Jordan. She was in a suburb. She didn't know if she was in Salt Lake. Call her a liar. It's another example. But here she is. She's on the phone with Ryan Burns. And yesterday, keep in mind, yesterday the state says Ryan Burns, no motive to lie. No motive to lie. And he talked to Jodi Arias that evening. Around 9:30 he said, and you recall me asking him, there was talk about when was Jodi expected up there? When was she going to be in the Salt Lake City area to West Jordan? About 12 hours. We talked and she said she'd be there in about 12 hours. That would have been about, you know, he said the conversation was around 9:30, 10 o'clock. That would have been about 10, he kept saying 10 or 11 the next morning. The morning of June 4th. She was expected in Utah on the morning of June 4th about 10 or 11 in the morning. Now, getting back to what I asked Mr. Burns, I asked him, when you talked to her, did she say anything? Did she make any excuses as to why she might be late? No, she said about 12 hours. Well, ladies and gentlemen, wouldn't you think if someone was on a covert mission, and that covert mission was about 5.5 to 6 hours away from her current location, from Pasadena to Mesa. She was going to eat up 6 hours just getting there, right? Wouldn't you, and you know, there's this talk about Ryan Burns being her alibi, etc. Well, wouldn't you tell this person, you know what? I may stop at the Grand Canyon and take some pictures. I may stop somewhere else and take some pictures. I may decide to pull over and take a nap at a rest area. Set up an alibi. Get yourself to the point where you're not expected till, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 in the afternoon, right? She didn't do that. 12 hours. She's expected in Utah, in Salt Lake. 12 hours. Doesn't set up any sort of alibi. That doesn't make any sense. Okay. So far, as it relates to this theory of premeditation, we really have things that don't make sense on this covert mission. We have one fact that admittedly, I'll admit to you, looks bad, right? Her phone goes off somewhere near Pasadena, California. And it doesn't get turned on until somewhere near the Hoover Dam, a day or so later. Okay, but that fact in and of itself, taken alone with all these other things that don't make any sense, could be seen as suspicious, but it's also probably the case that throughout the course of history of cell phones, that Jodi Arias would not be the first person to have a cell phone die on them and not have a charger available. She probably won't even be the last. Now, we have her in Pasadena. We have her talking to Ryan Burns, not setting up an alibi. And you saw the call records that she was speaking with Travis Alexander. What happens next? Showing you Exhibit 36. This is Mr. Alexander's office. Remember that Jodi told you that on the morning, what would be the morning now of June 4th, about 4:30, 5 o'clock-ish in the morning, she arrived at Mr. Alexander's home. And he was on the computer watching videos on YouTube. And the videos were of people dancing with boxes on their head, moving their hands around. And there were several of these videos, and we saw that recently, just a couple days ago, even when Detective Melendez testified. We went through that computer report. And it showed all those videos. And this is another example of one of those house of cards to try to call Miss Arias a liar. She never said that there was pornography. The defense never said there was pornography there. Jodi Arias told you there were people dancing with boxes on their heads. And that's what Travis Alexander was doing when she arrived at his home. Now the implication was made, maybe he was expecting her, maybe he wasn't. But we know there was phone calls. Jodi certainly told you he was expecting her. And if he wasn't, and keep in mind, of course, we're supposed to believe, and we'll get into that a little more later, we're supposed to believe that he's so scared of her, right? He's afraid of her. So my goodness, how could she just walk right in the house and then sleep with him, sleep in the bed, and then get up and take pictures of her? He's so scared of her, he's taken naked pictures of her in his bed. That is a new level of being scared. But anyway, let's go back to 4 in the morning. In the office. There they are. What Jodi said is that Travis had his back to her watching these videos. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's keep in mind here. This plot began back in May. And there she is. Under the state's theory, she's got the gun. We also heard the state say yesterday that she had the knife with her. They don't give you any evidence to support that, but she said they had the knife with you. So she has the implements of Travis's destruction in her hand. His back is to her watching the videos. We know he was watching the videos. And we also know, right, that she's in Mesa, Arizona, and that she's expected in West Jordan, Utah, now about 6 to no more than 7 hours later. Because it's almost 5 in the morning. Now, wouldn't you think, ladies and gentlemen, somebody is on this covert mission. They've done all these things to prepare themselves for the moment in time when she could kill Travis Alexander. Did she shoot him right then and there? I mean, she had the gun, she had the knife. Why wouldn't she do that? If that was her point of being there, why wouldn't she do that? God, that doesn't make any sense, does it? And then what do they do? What do they do next? We heard about drinking some water and Travis wanting to have some sex, and Jodi was too tired. But what do? They go to sleep, and they wake up in the early afternoon. Now, I will admit there's no support for the idea that, there's no evidence that they slept. Nobody took pictures of them sleeping, etc. But it certainly makes sense. He was up till almost 5 in the morning. She had been driving all night. And we have pictures taken later that afternoon. The sexual rendezvous, right? At 1:30 in the afternoon. The theory, or the question arises under this theory that the state has perpetrated to you. They're in bed together sleeping. She's got the gun. She's got the knife. He's asleep. What better opportunity would somebody need? He's asleep. You put the gun to his head and you do it. You put the knife to his throat and you do it. If that's what you're there to do, isn't that what you do? No better time than when he's asleep. She doesn't do that. Okay. What next? Well, you heard Jodi tell you that they had sex that afternoon, that he was tied her to a bed, and that they took pictures. Well, we have evidence of those pictures, right? We have pictures of Jodi naked on the bed. Then it begs the important question. Keep in mind now, under the state's theory, Jodi is there to kill Travis Alexander. Why, if somebody is there to commit a murder, do you hang out and let the intended victim of this murder take pictures of you at what's going to soon to be a crime scene? Here I am at the crime scene. Go ahead and take pictures of me. No problem. No problem at all. Now, that doesn't make any sense, does it? And we'll look at some of those pictures perhaps later, but keep in mind as well, in some of the pictures, this man is in utter fear of Miss Arias, can't even see her head or her face. You can see the despondent look on her face in some of these pictures. But keep in mind what was taken on June 3rd when she's on this mission. A picture from her own phone that she took in advance of being in Mr. Alexander's house. Another exhibit, 638, a picture that she took on June 3rd, 2008. If you're on a covert mission and you've dyed your hair and you've done all this in order to get there and kill Travis Alexander, why are you taking pictures of yourself with this hair color and allowing him to take pictures of you with this hair color? Right? Doesn't make any sense. And not only pictures, nude photographs. And not only nude photographs, but graphic depictions of her genitalia. Doesn't make any sense. They're the last thing you would want if you're there to commit a homicide, a murder, is to have pictures of yourself taken. But that's what happened. There's no dispute that that's what happened. So now, keep in mind, and I will just show you Exhibit 164. Keep in mind now This photograph was taken at 1:42 and 53 seconds. Jodi Arias, nude, on the bed. You can see her face, and you can see the time. 1:42. And that's important, ladies and gentlemen, because keep in mind now, by 1:42 in the afternoon of June 4th, Miss Arias